In the beginning, before maps, clocks, or even the idea of direction, there was only the rising and setting of the sun. It was the first and only clock humanity ever knew, a vast burning presence that decided when to wake, when to hunt, and when to hide. In those early ages, cavemen didn't understand astronomy or timekeeping, but they felt the pull of the light. Every dawn carried the promise of warmth. Every sunset, the creeping fear of darkness and death. The world around them was silent except for wind, fire, and heartbeat, a rhythm tied to the turning of the earth, though they had no words for it. When the first humans opened their eyes to the cold gray light of dawn, they didn't see east or west. They saw safety emerging from danger. They saw the long shadows of stone and bone stretch, shrink, and vanish, silent signals of the passing day. They felt the change in air, the stirring of animals, the slow awakening of a dangerous yet familiar world. Their survival was a dance with the light, and even though they didn't know it, they were already following the sun. It was the forgotten compass, invisible yet ever-present, guiding every instinct, every movement, and every breath of their existence. Life before the concept of time was raw and immediate. Cavemen couldn't measure hours or plan seasons. They lived in a loop of hunger, cold, and instinct. Yet, through countless generations, they began to sense a pattern. That light always returned after darkness. That warmth always followed cold. This understanding, fragile but profound, was the first seed of human intelligence. It was the birth of awareness, not the knowledge of how, but the realization of when. Knowing when to move, when to hunt, when to shelter, that became the earliest form of wisdom. In the Ice Age, this awareness often meant the difference between life and extinction. When nights stretched endlessly and the sun disappeared behind storm-thick skies, entire tribes huddled together in fear, whispering stories to keep hope alive. They didn't pray to gods yet. They prayed to the light itself. Fire became their imitation of the sun, a fragile glow against the black abyss. The flicker of flames mirrored the golden disk that ruled their world, and even the deepest winter, they believed that somewhere beyond the mountains and the clouds, the sun still lived, waiting to return. From the very start, sunlight shaped human emotion. It carved the boundary between safety and threat, between belonging and isolation. When the sun rose, men went to hunt. When it fell, they retreated into the earth. In caves, they painted what they saw: bison, deer, and mammoths illuminated by torches, perhaps reflections of the living world outside under daylight. Each image was an attempt to capture the essence of the light that gave them life. In this way, art was born from sunlight, not as decoration, but as devotion. What we call direction today, east, west, north, and south, were, for them, sensations, not symbols. The east was warmth on the face. The west was fading glow. The south meant comfort, while the north meant cold wind. They didn't know these things, they felt them. The earth spoke through temperature, shadow, and scent, and humans listened. That listening became their map. Every morning was a lesson, every evening an ending. Over time, these observations built an internal compass, not carved in stone, but etched into their instincts. Imagine a family of early humans waking in the dim blue hour before sunrise. The air is icy. Breath clouds drift like smoke. A man steps outside his cave, eyes squinting toward the faintest streak of gold on the horizon. He doesn't think of navigation or time. He feels where life will begin again. Behind him, a woman tends a small flame, coaxing it back to life with careful breaths. The sun and fire rise together, two forms of light, one divine and unreachable, the other mortal and fragile. And between them, humanity finds balance. For cavemen, every day was a rebirth. The coming of light meant more than warmth. It meant proof that the world still existed, that they had not been abandoned by nature. Each sunrise carried reassurance, a silent promise that no matter how endless the night felt, life continued. That repetition built memory. Memory built meaning, and meaning became the foundation of everything that would follow: calendars, rituals, hope, and science. When we look back now with our satellites and clocks, we forget how deeply light defined what it meant to be human. The first spark of intelligence didn't come from speech or tools. It came from observation. It came from watching shadows move and realizing that the world had rhythm. That realization made humans different from every other creature. It allowed them to plan, to dream, and eventually to control the fire, their own small sun. So before civilization, before history, before even language, there was awareness. The awareness that the world changes in cycles, that darkness always bows to dawn. That was the first knowledge, the first comfort, and the first religion. The sun was not just a star in the sky. It was the heartbeat of existence. It didn't need worship to be divine. It simply was. And the humans who followed it, without ever looking up, were unknowingly tracing the first steps of understanding the universe. Long before the invention of calendars, sundials, or even language, early humans lived within the rhythm of nature itself. There are no numbers to count days, no names for months or seasons, only sensations: warmth and cold, hunger and plenty, light and darkness. Life was measured not by time, but by experience. The cavemen didn't wake up at sunrise because they didn't have a concept of dawn. They woke when the world grew light and stirred when the air warmed. They slept when darkness fell and fear crept in. This was existence in its most primal form: pure, reactive, instinctive. Every beat of life moved to an invisible drum, the Earth's own rhythm, and humanity's earliest generations learned to dance to it. In that silent world, every living creature followed the same pulse. Wolves howled when the moon rose. Birds scattered at the break of light. Mammoths moved south as frost deepened. Humans, too, watched and imitated. They didn't just observe. They felt these patterns inside their bones. The growing chill before the long nights warned them to store food, to gather wood, to prepare hides. When the sun lingered longer and rivers thawed, they knew life would return. They couldn't explain it, but they could sense it, the unseen turning of the world. Over centuries, this awareness became humanity's first teacher, shaping behavior long before words or writing ever existed. In caves and open plains, survival was not a matter of luck, but of alignment. The tribes who listened to nature's rhythm, who noticed when birds migrated or when plants sprouted, endured. Those who didn't vanished. The concept of planning was born not from intellect, but from observation. Imagine a small group of hunter-gatherers in a valley. The air begins to feel heavy, the days shorten. Food grows scarce. Slowly, they notice that herds begin to move toward the horizon, following warmth. Instinctively, they follow too. They don't know why, but the rhythm of the world tugs them along. In that way, movement, migration, and survival were not random acts. They were guided by nature's silent metronome. The sun, the moon, the winds, the cry of birds, all of these became signals. Cavemen didn't track time by the rising and setting of the sun. They felt the change in the quality of light, the smell of the air, the texture of the ground. Their world was sensory, not intellectual. They knew that when shadows stretched long in the evening, the cold would soon arrive. They knew that when the air shimmered with heat, the rivers would shrink. Life was observation turned into instinct, instinct turned into rhythm, and rhythm turned into survival. They were not scientists, but their survival depended on pattern recognition, on trusting the pulse of the earth itself. As generations passed, this instinct became culture. Elders told stories around fires, stories that encoded these rhythms into memory. When the light fades earlier, the beasts move away, they'd say. When the winds howl, gather the children. Each tale wasn't just entertainment. It was survival advice hidden in myth. The tribe's children didn't study clocks. They studied the world. They watched the color of the sky change before storms. They felt how mornings smelled different in winter. They learned that stillness often came before danger. Every small shift in nature carried meaning, and every meaning was passed down through spoken memory. The world itself was their teacher, and their ability to listen was their greatest tool. Without the idea of time, there was only now. The cavemen didn't plan for tomorrow. They planned for after the sun moves or before the snow comes. Their entire existence was a cycle of preparation and endurance, repetition and renewal. They hunted, gathered, rested, and moved according to nature's rhythm, a rhythm that never stopped, never changed, never needed explaining. This life wasn't easy, but it was harmonious. They didn't struggle against nature. They moved with it. And in that movement, they found balance, a balance that modern civilization would one day lose. But even in this primitive simplicity, something profound was happening. The more they followed nature's rhythm, the more they began to predict it. They noticed that after a certain number of cold nights, warmth always returned. That after certain stars appeared in the sky, animals migrated. This was the first spark of foresight, the dawn of pattern recognition. Humans were no longer just reacting. They were anticipating. And that changed everything. For the first time, they were not just surviving within nature. They were beginning to understand it. This slow awakening reshaped their lives. Fires were built at certain times. Caves were chosen based on the angle of sunlight. And hunts began when the shadows grew just short enough to offer visibility without heat. Their instincts were evolving into intelligence, not through language or writing, but through rhythm. They began to sense that the world moved in circles, not lines, that light returned, seasons repeated, and even death was followed by renewal. These patterns gave birth to something humanity had never known before: hope. If light always returned after darkness, then perhaps survival was not just luck, but part of a larger order. For cavemen, this understanding was sacred even if they didn't call it so. They didn't worship the sun as a god yet, but they depended on it as if it were one. The first prayers weren't words, they were actions. The building of fires, the turning of faces toward warmth, the gathering at dawn, all were acts of gratitude and reverence. Through them, early humans learned not only to survive, but to belong. They were not separate from the world. They were threads in its endless pattern. As the ice age slowly receded and the world began to warm, this natural rhythm continued to guide their lives. It told them when to move, when to hunt, when to rest, and when to hope. It was the unspoken law that governed every heartbeat and every breath. Even without time, they lived by time's rhythm, the rhythm of the earth, the rhythm of survival. It was life before clocks, before calendars, before history. A life not measured in minutes or days, but in cycles of light and dark, hunger and fullness, fear and fire. And in that rhythm, in the simple act of living according to the world's natural heartbeat, humanity found its first harmony with the universe. They didn't just survive the passage of time. They became part of it. Long before the first written language or carved calendar stones, shadows became humanity's silent teachers. They appeared with light and vanished with night, stretching and shrinking with the slow movement of the sun. Cavemen, without knowing it, began to read them, not as symbols or science, but as signs of life and change. The world around them was constantly shifting, but shadows gave it rhythm and form. They taught humans that the sun did not only bring warmth, it also brought direction. Every flicker of light, every growing line of darkness was a clue, a whisper from the heavens that could be followed, trusted, and eventually understood. Imagine a group of early humans emerging from a cave at dawn. The cold air still clings to their breath, and the first golden rays crawl over the hills. As the light spills across the land, their own shadows fall long and dark behind them. They notice, perhaps unconsciously, that every morning those shadows point the same way. When the day grows older, the shadows turn. And by dusk, they have shifted completely, bending in the opposite direction. Day after day, season after season, these movements became patterns, patterns that the human brain, even in its early state, was designed to notice. Slowly, observation became understanding. The sun moved, and the shadows spoke its language. In those days, survival was a game of awareness. A hunter who noticed how shadows changed during the day knew when to track animals, when the light was soft enough not to reveal his presence. A mother gathering fruit or firewood learned to return before her shadow disappeared entirely, knowing that darkness brought danger. The tribe began to live according to light, using their bodies and the land itself as measuring tools. Rocks, trees, and bones all became primitive sundials. A large boulder casting a shadow in the same direction every morning marked safety and familiarity. If the shadow changed length too soon, it meant the season was shifting, perhaps signaling colder days ahead. This was the first form of orientation, not through maps or stars, but through light and shade. The cavemen didn't think of it as navigation. They simply learned the rhythm of their land. They could sense east without naming it. They could feel the tilt of the sun, the slant of its warmth. And when they traveled, following herds or searching for new shelters, they remembered the landscape through the way light touched it. The mountain where the morning light hits first. The valley that stays dark until late. These weren't just observations. They were memory anchors, the beginnings of spatial intelligence. The world was their compass, and the sun was its needle. Archaeological evidence supports this hidden awareness. In ancient shelters from Europe to Asia, the placement of hearths and sleeping areas often aligns with sunlight angles. Entrances faced east or southeast, welcoming the dawn, capturing warmth during the coldest hours. Cave art, too, was often created where sunlight reached deep inside for a brief period each day, illuminating painted walls as if they were alive. Early humans didn't decorate randomly. They chose light as a collaborator. They painted in rhythm with illumination, perhaps even performing rituals when the sun's rays touched certain figures. It was as if the shadows themselves completed the art, transforming static drawings into living, glowing visions of movement and life. Over generations, this relationship deepened. Cavemen began to anticipate the sun's movement. When hunting grounds darkened earlier than expected, they knew winter was approaching. When shadows grew shorter and the light stayed longer, they sensed the return of abundance. These observations weren't written down. They were lived, repeated, and remembered. The eldest among them became keepers of this knowledge, the first observers of celestial behavior. Around fires, they might gesture toward the sky and the fading light, teaching younger ones the secret of survival. Follow the sun, trust the pattern. It wasn't religion yet, but it was the birth of reverence, respect for the unseen force that governed every living thing. The human mind evolved in step with these realizations. Watching shadows required focus, memory, and imagination, abilities that would later give rise to language, storytelling, and science. To notice change is to think. To remember, it is to learn. And to predict, it is to create meaning. Each time an early human looked at their own shadow and wondered why it moved, they took a step closer to understanding their world. That curiosity, born from something as simple as sunlight and shape, became the seed of human consciousness. But shadows were not only guides, they were mysteries. They fascinated and frightened. For a species newly aware of itself, seeing one's own form reflected in darkness was both wonder and terror. To some, it might have felt like an extension of the soul, a double that came and went with the light. When the sun vanished, the shadow disappeared too. Did that mean life itself could vanish? Such questions may have haunted early minds, giving rise to the earliest spiritual ideas, that life was tethered to light, that darkness swallowed not only sight but existence. This interplay of curiosity and fear formed the psychological foundation for humanity's eternal relationship with the sun. As the centuries passed, the act of reading shadows evolved from instinct into deliberate observation. Stones were placed where light struck at specific times of day. Marks were carved where shadows reached their longest point. These were not decorations. They were measurements, primitive experiments in geometry and time. The same curiosity that made them track herds or carve symbols also made them track the journey of a light. Step by step, they were learning to interpret the sun's script written across the earth. They didn't yet understand that the planet moved around the sun, but they knew the sun ruled movement, warmth, and life. Through these humble beginnings, humans found structure in chaos. Shadows gave shape to time, turning endless days into measurable cycles. What was once survival became observation, and observation became understanding. The world was no longer a mystery to be endured. It was a story to be read. Each sunrise was the opening line, each shadow the punctuation of a day's rhythm. They may not have looked up, but they had begun to see, to recognize patterns and meaning in the simple interplay of light and dark. By the time their descendants painted sunbursts on cave walls or built monuments aligned with celestial paths, the foundation had already been laid by those nameless ancestors who watched their own shadows move. They had discovered the first compass, not in stone or metal, but in light itself. The sun had been their teacher, and the shadow its language. And so, long before the first civilization rose, humanity learned the most important lesson of all. To survive, you must listen to the earth, watch its signs, and understand its rhythm. The shadow was the first whisper of time, and those who followed it became the first seekers of truth, the first students of the sun. Fire and sunlight, two flames born from different worlds, yet both the lifelines of humanity. One ruled the heavens, distant and untouchable. The other was stolen from nature's chaos and tamed within the hands of man. Long before cavemen understood what fire truly was, they felt its kinship with the sun. Both gave warmth, both offered light, and both held the power to destroy or sustain life. In a frozen, unpredictable world, they became symbols of balance, the eternal dance between light and dark, life and death. The day belonged to the sun, but the night belonged to the fire. Together, they guarded humanity through every age of cold and fear. In those early millennia, the sun's light dictated existence. It woke the tribe, guided their hunts, and warmed their bones. But when the sun disappeared behind the horizon, so did safety. The night brought predators, freezing winds, and shadows too thick to see through. The world beyond the cave turned alien, filled with unseen movements and haunting cries. It was in that terror that fire became salvation. Perhaps it began as lightning striking dry grass, or as molten rock glowing from the earth's heart. The first humans didn't create it, they found it. And when they carried its embers back to their shelters, they unknowingly carried a piece of the sun itself. Imagine that moment. A handful of trembling figures huddled around their first controlled flame. The flickering light dances on their faces, revealing awe and disbelief. The cave walls seem alive with moving shapes, as if the spirits of the hunt had come to life. For the first time, the sun's warmth continues after sunset. For the first time, night is not absolute. The tribe sits closer, mesmerized, reaching out toward the flickering glow. The fire crackles like breath, casting orange halos against the rock. They don't know it yet, but this is humanity's first rebellion against darkness. Their first declaration that survival is no longer entirely in nature's hands. The parallels between fire and the sun shaped their spiritual and emotional world. In the glow of both, life thrived. Without them, existence froze. The cavemen began to treat fire not as a tool, but as a living thing, something to be fed, protected, and feared. In its warmth, they saw the same golden color that touched their faces at dawn. In its rising smoke, they saw a reflection of the rising sun. Some tribes believed that fire was born from the sun's rays, a gift sent down to keep them alive. Others saw it as captured lightning, a spark of divine power that linked the heavens and the earth. This belief wove itself into rituals, myths, and daily survival. Every day, they followed the great sun across the sky. Every night, they recreated it within their caves. The hearth became the heart of the tribe. Around it, they cooked, healed, planned, and remembered. Fire turned strangers into families, tribes into communities. Its light extended their waking hours, allowing stories to be told long after the sun's disappearance. In those stories, fire took on human traits: temperamental, demanding, and sacred. It burned with hunger, grew when fed, died when neglected. Like the sun, it had moods, gentle warmth or fierce destruction. It was not just energy, it was a being that lived alongside them. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Gesher, Banat Yuakov, and Shalvik Cave reveals how early humans learned to control fire tens of thousands of years before civilization. Burned bones, soot-lined ceilings, and fire-blackened stones showed deliberate placement. Hearths positioned where heat and light could spread most effectively. Some entrances were oriented toward the east, allowing morning sunlight to blend with the glow of the previous night's fire. This alignment was not coincidence. It reflected a deep, instinctive understanding that the two sources of light complemented each other, one to begin the day, the other to preserve it. For Ice Age humans, this connection was sacred. Fire allowed them to mimic the sun during the most dangerous hours. It dried their hides, smoked their meat, and kept predators at bay. The fire's crackle became the sound of safety, a heartbeat within the cave. Children were born beside it. The dead were burned by it. Each spark symbolized continuity, a reminder that even when the great sun vanished from the sky, its essence remained within their grasp. In that way, humanity transformed dependence into mastery. They no longer waited helplessly for dawn. They made their own. The psychological comfort of fire cannot be overstated. In the flickering light, the darkness receded just enough for the mind to rest. Faces looked human again, and shadows, though still strange, became companions rather than threats. The fire became a storyteller, its movement hypnotic, its warmth intimate. It united the tribe under a single glow. The connection between the celestial sun and the earthly fire formed a symbolic bridge, one unreachable, one within touch. Humanity stood between the two, learning to exist in both realms. Over time, this understanding shaped early beliefs. The duality of the sun and fire gave rise to ideas of life and spirit. To keep the flame alive was to honor existence. To let it die was to invite chaos. Many early societies, even thousands of years later, kept eternal flames burning, a tradition born from these primal instincts. Fire was more than survival, it was identity. The tribe that held fire held power, knowledge, and continuity. It marked the dawn of culture, the separation between animal instinct and human intention. Through the mastery of fire, humans began to mirror the sun's role in their own small way. They became creators of light, distributors of warmth, shapers of the night. This newfound control transformed not only their physical lives, but their minds. Around firelight, they began to dream. The dancing shadows on the walls became inspiration for art, memory, and imagination. In those glowing hours, humanity took its first steps toward storytelling, toward meaning. And every flame they kindled was a quiet echo of the star that burned above them. So when we say that cavemen followed the sun, it is not only literal, it is spiritual. They followed its rhythm during the day and recreated its presence at night. The sun and fire were the twin torches that guided evolution, not just of the body, but of the mind. They taught humans that light could be both given and made, that warmth could be both received and shared. One ruled the heavens, the other ruled the heart. And from that union, from the meeting of the celestial and the human, the long journey of civilization began. The first sunrise, the first spark, and the first flame were all part of the same story. The story of how humankind, once afraid of the dark, learned to carry its own light. In the prehistoric world, survival began not with weapons, but with walls. Before humans learned the language of stone or fire, they learned the art of finding warmth, a place where the biting wind could not reach, where snow could not bury them alive. For the cavemen, shelter was not merely protection. It was an extension of their body, their skin against the cold. The right shelter meant life. The wrong one meant a silent death beneath the frost. When the endless winters of the Ice Age stretched across the land, the temperature dropped far below what naked flesh could endure. The earliest humans, wrapped in the hides of hunted beasts, moved across frozen plains in search of refuge. Caves were the most precious of discoveries, ready-made sanctuaries carved by time and water. They were the Earth's womb, a safe retreat where man could rest, heal, and prepare for another day of survival. To step inside, one was to step into life itself. But caves were not chosen at random. Cavemen were keen observers, guided by instincts sharpened by generations of trial and error. They learned to look for caves facing the south, where sunlight entered during the day and warmth lingered even after sunset. They avoided those with deep, narrow entrances, where wind howled like a living beast, and instead preferred wide openings that could be sealed with rocks, wood, or animal skins. Each shelter was carefully examined for traces of predators, the bones of bears, the scent of wolves, or claw marks on stone. A cave was only home once it was conquered. Inside, life took on a rhythm shaped by necessity. The first task was to control the fire, the heart of every shelter. Stones were arranged to contain sparks, ashes were spread to insulate, and smoke vents were carved toward the roof. The walls glowed with dancing light, their shadows forming strange patterns that gave birth to imagination. Around the fire, the tribe organized their space with surprising intelligence. Sleeping areas to the back, storage near the walls, and the entrance kept clear for defense. Even without architecture, there was design. The cave became a living organism, breathing, glowing, and protecting. Yet not every tribe was lucky enough to find a cave. Many were wanderers of the tundra, forced to build their own warmth from what the land offered. They learned to construct shelters from bones, branches, and hides, creating primitive huts strong enough to withstand howling storms. In Siberia and Ukraine, archaeologists have discovered massive dwellings made entirely of mammoth bones, dating back over 20,000 years. Each tusk was used as a pillar, each skull as a cornerstone. Over them, thick layers of animal hide were stretched, sealed with mud and snow. These were not crude improvisations. They were feats of adaptation, masterpieces of survival architecture. Imagine standing within one of these bone shelters. The air smells of smoke and fat. The walls are pale ivory, their curves reflecting the flicker of firelight. Outside, the wind screams through an endless white wasteland, but inside, it is warm, almost sacred. The tribe huddles close, wrapped in furs, listening to the storm batter the world they've escaped. The roof creaks, but holds. In that moment, the shelter is more than a structure, it is defiance itself. It is proof that human will can stand against the cruelty of nature. The construction of these shelters required intelligence, teamwork, and memory. Each generation passed down techniques. How to angle bones to break the wind, how to layer hides for insulation, how to seal cracks with animal fat. Every improvement meant another winter survived. The tribe became engineers of the frozen earth, learning from their failures and triumphs. Over time, their shelters evolved from temporary hide tents to semi-permanent homes. In these early innovations lay the seeds of architecture, a silent promise that one day, humans would raise walls not from survival, but from imagination. Warmth, however, was not only physical. The emotional warmth of togetherness became an invisible part of every shelter. Inside those close walls, families grew, children learned, and elders told stories that stitched identity into the cold fabric of time. The shelter became the stage of humanity's first social bonds. It was where laughter echoed, where grief was shared, where rituals were born. Firelight illuminated more than faces. It illuminated the beginnings of culture. Every scratch on the cave wall, every handprint in ochre was a declaration. We were here. We survived. The act of decorating those shelters with art was more than aesthetic. It was psychological survival. The drawings of bison, mammoths, and hunters on cave walls served as reminders of life beyond the cold, of movement, success, and hope. They gave meaning to the monotony of winter. Some historians believe these drawings were early prayers or visual magic, attempts to summon abundance or courage. Others see them as memory keepers, recording hunts and migrations. Whatever their intent, they transformed cold, dark shelters into sacred spaces, places where human thought began to take shape. As the Ice Age waned and the climate shifted, humans carried their architectural memory with them. They built shelters from wood and reeds near rivers, using mud and clay to seal cracks. The lessons of the cave and the bone hut lived on in every future civilization, in the huts of early farmers, in the tents of nomads, and eventually in the stone houses of cities. What began as survival became art. What began as instinct became design. The first wall ever raised against the cold was also the first step toward civilization. But perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this: those ancient shelters still whisper through time. When we light a fire in our modern homes, when we close the door against winter, we repeat an ancient ritual. The same desire that drove cavemen to seal their caves drives us still, the longing for warmth, for safety, for belonging. It is the oldest human need, older than language, older than gods. To build warmth is to build meaning. And so, each shelter, whether carved in stone or built from bones, was a message to the universe. We will endure. Even as the cold sought to erase them, they built, they dreamed, they stayed. In the flicker of their fires and the quiet of their walls, humanity's greatest creation was born. Not tools or weapons, but the concept of home. In the heart of the Ice Age, sunlight became a rare and precious resource. Winters stretched endlessly, and the sun barely rose above the horizon, casting pale, fleeting rays over a frozen landscape. For cavemen, every hour of light was survival itself. Darkness brought not only cold, but predators and isolation. The world was unforgiving, and the sun was their only measure of safety, warmth, and hope. Following its path was no longer simply a matter of curiosity. It was necessity. Life and death were dictated by the angle of light, the length of shadows, and the timing of the day. Tribes learned to position themselves according to sunlight. Caves with eastern exposure were preferred, capturing the first golden rays to warm, cold bodies. Open plains were avoided during midday when the sun's glare could blind hunters or reveal their presence to predators. Seasonal movement became tied to light. When the sun lingered longer, hunting intensified. When it shortened, food was rationed and shelters reinforced. The Ice Age demanded constant attention to these subtle changes. A tribe that ignored them risked frostbite, starvation, or the loss of children. In this way, sunlight was more than illumination. It was the heartbeat of life itself. Hunting in winter required intimate knowledge of light. Animals also followed the sun, migrating or resting according to its movement. Early humans observed patterns: deer grazing in morning light, mammoths moving south as the sun weakened, predators hunting under the faint afternoon glow. By following these signs, hunters maximized efficiency and minimized risk. Dawn hunts offered warmth and better visibility, while evening hunts were avoided to prevent encounters with predators emerging from the shadows. Sunlight became both compass and clock, dictating the rhythm of every action. Even within shelters, the winter sun shaped daily life. Fires were positioned to mimic its trajectory, extending warmth into the coldest hours. Food was dried or smoked in its light, stored where the weak rays of winter could reach and preserve it. The tribe's activities revolved around the sun's brief passage across the sky. Children played where light penetrated the cave, elders sat where warmth lasted longest, and hunters left as soon as the first glow illuminated the horizon. The pattern of light became a guide for survival, discipline, and planning, a subtle calendar encoded in daily behavior. Observation of the sun's subtle changes also prepared cavemen for the coming months. They noted the shortening days, the the weakened intensity of sunlight, and the chill that followed. Over time, this knowledge allowed them to anticipate scarcity, plan migrations, and store food. They learned that the sun's angle predicted frost, that shadows lengthened with approaching storms, and that the first snow hinted at a long winter ahead. These insights were not theoretical. They were lived experience, engraved in memory, and passed orally from generation to generation. The psychological importance of sunlight in winter cannot be overstated. In a world dominated by white landscapes and endless cold, even a faint ray carried hope. It marked continuity, the assurance that darkness would end and life would persist. Social cohesion often centered around the sun. Tribes gathered in lighted spaces, shared warmth, and reinforced bonds. Fire and sun worked together, the flicker of flame extending the brief comfort of daylight, creating zones of safety and reassurance. In those small patches of illumination, life was celebrated and fear was held at bay. Ice Age winters were cruel, but they taught humans adaptability and foresight. Following the sun meant more than survival. It meant understanding the cycles of nature. Cavemen learned to anticipate, plan, and cooperate. They recognized that the sun's scarcity demanded resourcefulness, rationing food, choosing when to hunt or rest, and constructing shelters that captured every available warmth. Through these trials, they developed not only resilience but ingenuity, the first sparks of human strategy and intelligence. In essence, the winter sun was a teacher, a compass, and a provider. It dictated movement, behavior, and a social structure. Its presence guided every decision, from where to build a shelter to when to leave for a hunt. Cavemen didn't merely chase light for comfort. They followed it as a lifeline. Its fleeting glow was survival mapped across the frozen land, a subtle force shaping the evolution of early human society. By the end of winter, when the days finally grew longer and light lingered, the tribes celebrated the return of warmth. Every sunrise had been a victory, every hour of sunlight a precious gift. Through the hardships of the coldest months, humans learned patience, observation, and reverence for nature's rhythms. They understood that survival was inseparable from the sun, that life itself depended on tracking its path, and that even the smallest ray could mean the difference between endurance and extinction. When the world was blanketed in snow and ice, hunting became the central act of survival. Food was scarce, and every step carried risk. Cavemen faced not only the challenge of finding prey, but also the threat of predators and the biting cold. Silence was survival. Movement had to be calculated, breaths controlled, senses heightened. The Ice Age taught humans the art of patience and precision, transforming hunting from mere necessity into an instinctual dance with nature. Early humans learned to track animals by observing subtle signs, footprints in snow, broken branches, or the direction of migrating herds. They noticed patterns, which paths deer followed, where mammoths dug for roots, and when predators prowled under the fading winter light. The sun and shadows guided these hunters, revealing openings and dangers alike. Dawn hunts allowed warmth from the sun's first rays, while late afternoon hunts required careful calculation to avoid lurking predators. Every hunt was a lesson in timing, strategy, and endurance. Weapons were primitive yet effective. Stone-tipped spears, sharpened wooden clubs, and later, bone knives allowed hunters to confront massive animals. These tools were crafted with thought and passed down through generations. The process of making them, selecting stones, shaping wood, binding with sinew, demanded patience and knowledge. Each weapon was a small extension of the hunter's skill, and mastery could mean the difference between a successful hunt and a night of hunger. Beyond physical skill, hunting required mental resilience, reading the environment, predicting animal behavior, and working as a coordinated group. Group dynamics played a crucial role. Hunting in winter was rarely solitary. Teams coordinated to drive herds toward natural traps, cliffs, narrow valleys, or frozen rivers. Others waited in ambush, spears ready, Fire prepared to corral prey if necessary. Cooperation extended beyond the hunt. Knowledge of terrain, animal behavior, and weather was shared orally. This collective memory allowed tribes to endure winters that could have otherwise been fatal. Through hunting, humans strengthened not only their bodies, but also their social bonds. Survival required ingenuity. Snow, ice, and frozen ground became tools rather than obstacles. Hunters disguised themselves with animal hides, tracked by scent and shape, and even used fire or torches to manipulate prey movement. Observation of natural events guided strategy. A sudden thaw, a change in wind, or shifting sunlight could signal opportunity or danger. Humans learned to read the frozen landscape as a living map, where every shadow, crack, and footprint carried vital information. Adaptation was constant, and failure often meant death. Hunting also shaped diet and culture. Large prey provided meat for nourishment, hides for clothing and shelter, and bones for tools and art. The pursuit of animals intertwined with ritual. Before hunts, small ceremonies may have been performed, asking for success or giving thanks for life taken. This was an early blending of survival and spirituality, where respect for nature coexisted with practical necessity. Food scarcity made every kill precious, forging a deep connection between humans and their environment. Even the smallest lessons mattered. Young hunters observed elders tracking herds, reading snow patterns, and judging distances. These skills were internalized and refined over time. Each generation became slightly more efficient, slightly more attuned to the frozen world around them. Knowledge of animal behavior, seasonal movement, and environmental cues became a silent curriculum, passed down without writing, measured only in survival. In the harshest winters, hunting became more than subsistence. It was a test of intelligence, cooperation, and courage. The world demanded strategy. Impulsiveness was fatal. Human ingenuity, born from necessity, allowed early humans to endure where mere strength would fail. Every successful hunt reinforced trust within the tribe, strengthened bonds, and ensured survival through months of scarcity. By chasing prey through frozen forests and icy plains, cavemen became masters of adaptation. They learned to navigate vast, white landscapes, to understand the delicate balance between predator and prey, and to survive in a world that offered no second chances. Hunting was not merely a task. It was the crucible in which early human skill, social cohesion, and instinct were forged. The frozen silence of the Ice Age, once terrifying, became a classroom. Every step, every rustle, every movement of light and shadow taught lessons that ensured life. Humans learned to follow patterns, predict behavior, and trust both fire and each other. In the end, survival was not guaranteed by strength alone, but by observation, planning, and the relentless pursuit of life through snow and cold. Fire was nothing less than a lifeline for Ice Age humans, a fragile yet powerful force that separated life from death in a world dominated by freezing temperatures. The bitter wind, deep snow, and plunging night temperatures made survival almost impossible without a controlled flame. Beyond providing warmth, fire offered light, protection from predators, a means to cook food, and a psychological anchor in a vast, silent, and hostile landscape. In every sense, fire was both a practical tool and a symbol of human ingenuity, a force that transformed the environment and allowed humans to thrive where survival otherwise seemed improbable. Initially, fire was rare and often discovered by accident, born from lightning strikes, volcanic activity, or spontaneous combustion in dry vegetation. The first humans learned to recognize the benefits of this natural phenomenon: warmth, the ability to cook meat, and a safe area to gather. Once discovered, fire became a treasure to be preserved. Embers were carefully protected and transported in hollowed logs, stones, or containers made from animal stomachs. This ability to maintain fire and move it across frozen landscapes was a crucial survival skill. One small ember could be the difference between a safe night and a deadly exposure to freezing conditions. The mastery of fire required observation, experimentation, and skill. Humans learned to ignite flames intentionally through friction techniques, such as rubbing sticks together, drilling wood, or striking flint against pyrite. These methods demanded patience, persistence, and practice. Each successful spark was a triumph of intellect over the raw forces of nature, demonstrating early humans' capacity to manipulate their environment. Generations refined these techniques, passing knowledge down through oral teaching and demonstration, ensuring that every tribe member could contribute to maintaining the flame that symbolized life itself. Fire was central to daily life, extending far beyond mere warmth. It allowed humans to cook meat, rendering it more digestible, nutritious, and safe to eat. Cooking also enabled consumption of otherwise inedible parts of animals, increasing food efficiency during scarce winters. Fire assisted in processing hides for clothing, creating soft, insulating layers to combat frostbite and hypothermia. It also facilitated woodworking, shaping tools, and crafting shelters. In every way, fire was a multi-purpose technology that amplified human capabilities and directly influenced survival rates. The hearth itself became a focal point of social organization. Within the protective glow of flames, communities gathered, coordinated tasks, and shared knowledge. Elders taught hunting strategies, tool-making techniques, and environmental observation skills, while children observed and participated in age-appropriate activities. Firelight enabled evening work and social interaction during long winter nights, fostering both cooperation and cultural continuity. The hearth symbolized stability, creating a central hub around which social bonds were strengthened and survival knowledge was transmitted. Fire also provided protection from predators, which were an omnipresent threat during the Ice Age. Wolves, bears, and other carnivores were deterred by flames and smoke, reducing the risk to humans while they slept or worked. Controlled fire was sometimes used strategically during hunts to corral animals or guide them toward traps. Early humans developed an instinctive understanding of fire behavior, learning how to use smoke, flame intensity, and placement to manipulate their environment and influence animal behavior. Fire was both shield and weapon, illustrating a profound comprehension of cause and effect long before the advent of formal science. Psychologically, fire had a profound impact. The endless nights of winter, stretching for hours under a cold and dark sky, could be paralyzing. Firelight provided comfort, reassurance, and a sense of control. It created a mental space of safety where fear was mitigated, focus sharpened, and social cohesion reinforced. Around the hearth, storytelling emerged as a vital tradition, transmitting survival knowledge, reinforcing social hierarchy, and embedding lessons for future generations. Shadows dancing on cave walls became a canvas for memory, imagination, and cultural identity, demonstrating the inseparable link between survival, cognition, and culture. Fire also influenced mobility and migration strategies. Tribes learned to carry embers carefully during journeys, ensuring that portable heat could support temporary shelters along the way. This allowed humans to survive in exposed landscapes, maintain warmth for sleeping, and cook or process food during transit. Knowledge of fire-making techniques became a critical survival skill, particularly for younger tribe members who would need to rekindle flames in unfamiliar territories. Fire, therefore, was not static but mobile, a tool that extended human range and resilience across vast, frozen landscapes. The maintenance of fire demanded responsibility and collaboration. Designated fire keepers or skilled elders ensured that flames were managed safely, embers were preserved, and fuel was gathered efficiently. Mistakes could result in injury, loss of warmth, or the destruction of valuable resources. This task required constant attention, discipline, and foresight, embedding early social hierarchies and cooperative norms. Fire became both a communal resource and a sacred trust, linking technical skill with social responsibility. Fire also catalyzed innovation in other domains. Observing how heat affected materials led to improved clothing, cooking techniques, and tool treatment. Stone could be hardened or shaped using heat. Bones and wood could be treated to increase durability. Fire also allowed experimentation with preservation methods, such as smoking meat or softening hides. These practices reflect a growing understanding of environmental manipulation, a cognitive leap that laid the groundwork for increasingly sophisticated technology. In ritual and symbolic contexts, fire assumed a spiritual dimension. It was a bridge between humans and the natural world, connecting the tribe to cycles of day and night, warmth and cold, life and death. Seasonal ceremonies, offerings, and rites often revolved around the hearth, acknowledging its role as protector and provider. These practices reinforced social cohesion, transmitted knowledge, and imbued survival with meaning. Fire was thus simultaneously a tool, a psychological anchor, and a cultural emblem, shaping human behavior in multiple dimensions. Ultimately, fire defined Ice Age life. It was the first element humans learned to control, the cornerstone of physical survival, and the catalyst for social and cognitive development. Fire allowed humans to extend their reach into frozen landscapes, endure otherwise lethal conditions, and develop complex social structures. The lessons embedded in fire management, observation, experimentation, cooperation, and foresight shaped early human society and cognition. Mastery of fire was a testament to the adaptability and ingenuity of early humans. It demonstrated that survival depended not merely on strength, endurance, or instinct, but on intelligence, collaboration, and the ability to transform the environment to meet human needs. Fire illuminated not only caves and shelters, but also the path towards civilization, culture, and enduring human legacy. Every spark, ember, and maintained flame was a declaration of life, a victory against nature's harshest forces, and a foundation upon which the future of humanity was built. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, water was both essential and elusive. Rivers froze, lakes became sheets of solid ice, and snow covered the land like a white shroud. For early humans, survival required ingenuity to locate, access, and preserve life's most basic necessity. Without water, fire would not burn, hides could not be softened, and flesh could not endure. Every sip was a triumph, and every source discovered a potential lifeline in a world dominated by cold and scarcity. Cavemen quickly learned that not all ice was equal. Snow, while abundant, was insufficient if eaten directly. It would lower body temperature dangerously. They learned to melt snow near fire embers, creating small pools of liquid warmth. Rivers and streams, though partially frozen, could be tapped by breaking thin ice or chipping away at ice shelves. In some regions, the sun itself became a tool. Shallow depressions in snow or rock could catch rays, slowly melting to provide droplets of drinking water. Observation and patience became critical. Each technique reflected an understanding of physical principles long before science could name them. Collecting water required strategy and foresight. Cavemen could not rely on a single source. The landscape was unpredictable. Tribes memorized locations where rivers emerged from frozen depths, where underground springs created pockets of liquid, or where ice melted more quickly due to sun exposure. Seasonal shifts dictated movement. In early winter, streams could still be tapped. In midwinter, reliance shifted to snow and ice manipulation. This constant monitoring of the environment honed observational skills and fostered early environmental intelligence. Humans became students of microclimates, reading the subtle hints that nature provided about the presence of life-sustaining water. Water was also central to food preparation and survival. Snow and ice could be melted to cook meat or soften hides for clothing. Fires and heated stones turned frozen carcasses into edible meals. Tribes learned to store water in containers made from hollowed logs, shells, or animal stomachs, an early form of resource management. Access to water was closely tied to health. Dehydration could be fatal in the harsh cold, when bodily energy was already strained. In this way, water became a vital connector between fire, food, clothing, and overall survival strategy. Travelers relied on water as well. Following herds often meant moving across vast icy plains with few visible sources. Knowledge of hidden streams or thawed ponds could determine the success of a journey. Guides within the tribe remembered these locations, passing their wisdom orally to younger generations. Each trek became a map of memory and instinct, encoded with water locations, sunlight angles, and potential hazards. This knowledge of the landscape, where to find warmth, shelter, and hydration, was the difference between life and death. Ice itself was both obstacle and opportunity. Thick sheets could block paths or hide predators, but could also serve as bridges across frozen rivers. Cavemen learned to judge ice stability, recognizing cracks, textures, and sounds that indicated safety or danger. They used ice to trap or corral prey, guiding animals toward fragile surfaces where hunters could strike. Even frozen terrain became a tool, demonstrating that survival was not merely endurance, but active manipulation of the environment. The coldest element of the world was transformed into a resource. Social cooperation often centered on water sources. Tribes gathered near streams and springs, sharing knowledge, guarding resources, and dividing tasks. The most experienced members taught others to read ice thickness, melt snow efficiently, and recognize safe drinking spots. This cooperation reinforced social bonds, strengthened trust, and ensured collective survival. Water became more than sustenance. It became a symbol of planning, skill, and shared responsibility. Psychologically, access to water provided comfort and hope. In the vast white deserts of snow, a pool of liquid or a trickle from a spring represented continuity, a promise that life could persist even in the harshest conditions. Tribes celebrated these finds, knowing that every drop was precious and could not be taken for granted. In this way, water intertwined with culture, survival, and strategy, shaping behavior and decision-making in profound ways. Ultimately, the quest for water shaped the human mind as much as it shaped the body. Observation, experimentation, foresight, and cooperation were honed through the pursuit of liquid life. Cavemen learned that survival depended not only on strength, fire, or clothing, but on knowledge, resourcefulness, and adaptability. Every frozen stream melted by fire, every snow patch converted to drinking water, was a small victory against an unforgiving world. By mastering water and ice, humans transformed scarcity into opportunity. They turned frozen landscapes into manageable spaces and relied on careful observation to predict seasonal changes. Water became a symbol of ingenuity, patience, and a delicate balance between life and the frozen forces surrounding them. In the end, to find and harness water in the Ice Age was to assert mastery over nature itself, a subtle, yet profound, step in humanity's long journey toward survival, intelligence, and civilization. In the frozen wilderness, survival depended as much on human connection as on fire, food, and clothing. The Ice Age was merciless, and a solitary individual was almost certainly doomed. Cavemen learned early that life could only continue through cooperation, trust, and shared knowledge. The tribe became a living shelter, a network of protection, warmth, and emotional support that extended beyond physical structures. Bonds forged in cold, hunger, and danger were as essential as the furs on their backs or the fire at their feet. Family units were at the core of this social network. Elders carried knowledge of the land, the sun, and the habits of animals. Their experience guided the tribe through the harshest seasons, teaching young hunters when to track prey, when to conserve energy, and how to read the subtle signs of nature. Children, in turn, learned by observation, imitation, and play. Social roles were fluid yet vital. Everyone contributed according to skill, age, and ability. Cooperation was instinctive, a matter of life or death. Hunting and gathering demanded collective effort. Some members drove herds toward traps, while others waited in ambush. Firekeeping was a communal duty. The hearth was tended continuously to ensure warmth and security. Food preparation and distribution reinforced social hierarchy and fairness. By sharing meat and preserving it for later use, tribes reduced internal conflict and maximized survival. The act of giving and receiving fostered loyalty, strengthened trust, and created interdependence, essential qualities in a world where one mistake could be fatal. Storytelling and oral tradition were equally crucial. Around the fire, elders recounted hunts, migrations, and encounters with predators. These stories transmitted knowledge, encoded survival strategies, and built cultural identity. They were not mere entertainment. They were education, memory, and psychological support all at once. In a world where winter nights could stretch endlessly, the fire's glow and the rhythm of familiar voices offered reassurance, connection, and hope. Shadows danced across cave walls, bringing stories to life and transforming mere survival into shared experience. Rituals emerged from these bonds. Seasonal celebrations, offerings before hunts, or ceremonies to honor the dead strengthened communal cohesion. These acts created meaning in the midst of harsh, unpredictable circumstances. By embedding survival within ritual and social practice, early humans reinforced cooperation and trust. Every shared meal, every collective hunt, and every moment of warmth beside the fire became a reinforcement of identity and mutual reliance. The winter landscape itself fostered empathy and collaboration. When blizzards struck, or when the cold intensified, the tribe huddled together for warmth. Knowledge was pooled to build shelters, maintain fires, and locate food and water. The weakest members were protected, ensuring that vital knowledge and genetic diversity endured. Mutual care was not only ethical, it was practical. The tribe's survival depended on its ability to function as a cohesive unit, where each individual's well-being was intertwined with the rest. Social bonds also facilitated problem-solving and innovation. Collective observation allowed groups to identify hunting strategies, improve clothing, and optimize shelter construction. Sharing experiences led to experimentation and refinement. The Ice Age environment, while harsh, became a classroom in which cooperation accelerated adaptation. Skills developed individually, but they reached full potential only through collaboration, demonstrating that survival was as much social as it was physical. Psychologically, these bonds countered fear. In the vast, silent, frozen world, isolation was terrifying. The warmth of a companion's presence reduced stress, reinforced courage, and strengthened resilience. Children who grew up in close-knit groups learned trust, empathy, and communication, qualities that would define humanity long after the Ice Age. The tribe was a microcosm of order and stability amid chaos, a living testament to the power of human connection. Even in moments of scarcity, cooperation remained central. Food, fire, and clothing were shared according to need and skill, balancing survival with fairness. This collective intelligence ensured that no one was left behind, even as conditions worsened. Groups that failed to cooperate often perished, while those that maintained social cohesion endured. Over time, the mechanisms of collaboration became ingrained, shaping not only survival strategies, but the very structure of human society. In essence, the tribe itself was a shelter as vital as any cave or fire. It provided warmth, protection, knowledge, and psychological security. Through social bonds, early humans transformed isolation into community, fear into resilience, and survival into culture. The strength of the tribe was a force as tangible as the sun or the fire, demonstrating that human connection was as essential to life in the Ice Age as the resources that surrounded them. By prioritizing collaboration, communication, and care, early humans laid the foundation for the social structures that would define humanity for millennia. The harsh winters taught them not only how to endure cold, but also how to endure together, a lesson as critical as mastering fire, furs, and hunting. In the end, Warmth was not only in hides or embers, but in the bonds between people who faced the Ice Age as one. In the frozen wilderness, hunting was not merely a practical endeavor. It was a sacred act intertwined with belief, ritual, and survival. The Ice Age was brutal, and every hunt carried profound consequences. A failed hunt could mean starvation. A successful one meant warmth, sustenance, and continuity. Early humans did not take these outcomes lightly. Over time, the act of tracking, capturing, and preparing prey evolved into a ritualized practice, a blend of skill, observation, and spirituality that reinforced social cohesion, respect for nature, and survival strategy. Before a hunt, tribes often engaged in preparatory rituals, whether silently or with ceremony. Hunters might adorn themselves with symbolic marks, apply pigments to faces or hides, or carry charms believed to ensure success. Fires would be kindled and maintained in specific ways, perhaps as offerings to unseen forces or as guidance for spirits believed to inhabit the land. These actions, repeated over generations, transformed practical preparation into symbolic meaning. Hunting became more than a task. It became an intersection of life, death, and human understanding of the natural world. Observation and intuition played a central role. Hunters learned to read animal tracks, note seasonal patterns, and interpret subtle environmental changes. Yet ritual provided a psychological framework for these observations. By framing the hunt as a sacred endeavor, humans enhanced focus, discipline, and group coordination. Collective chants, gestures, or silent odes reinforced a sense of purpose. Every member knew their role, understood the stakes, and internalized the shared responsibility for survival. These rituals were early methods of cognitive training, ensuring that experience and instinct were aligned with practical outcomes. Cave art reflected the deep connection between hunting and ritual. Paintings of mammoths, bison, and deer often appeared in places illuminated by natural sunlight or firelight, creating a sense of animism, life within the animals themselves. These images may have been meant to honor the creatures, summon abundance, or teach young hunters about behavior and strategy. Through art, early humans created a symbolic link between action and outcome, embedding lessons and reverence in every brushstroke. The sacred and practical merged seamlessly, demonstrating that survival was never purely physical. Fire was central to these rituals. The hearth symbolized life, power, and connection to both the sun and the spirits of the world. Smoke rising from flames may have been interpreted as a message to unseen forces, a conduit between humans and the greater natural order. Hunters returning from successful expeditions might circle the fire with offerings of meat or bones, reinforcing gratitude and reciprocity with the environment. The rituals surrounding the hearth structured daily life, connected generations, and underscored the moral and spiritual dimensions of survival. Sacred hunting practices also reinforced social hierarchy and communal roles. Experienced hunters led expeditions, teaching younger members the necessary skills while maintaining the ritual framework. Elders oversaw preparations, ensuring that both spiritual and practical knowledge were observed. Children watched, learned, and participated in age-appropriate ways, gradually internalizing not only techniques, but also the ethical and spiritual codes of the tribe. In this manner, ritual served as both instruction and cohesion, ensuring continuity of knowledge and survival strategies. The psychological impact of these rituals was profound. Ice Age winters were long, harsh, and psychologically taxing. Ritualized hunting provided structure and meaning in an otherwise chaotic world. Successes were celebrated. Failures were analyzed and contextualized. These practices reduced anxiety, strengthened morale, and cultivated resilience. By embedding survival within ceremony, early humans transformed fear into respect and uncertainty into preparedness. They created a mental framework in which survival was achievable, predictable, and purposeful. Animals themselves became central to belief systems. The mammoth, bison, and deer were not merely prey. They were revered beings whose spirits had to be honored. Early humans understood instinctively that respect for the creatures they relied upon fostered sustainable practices. Overhunting was avoided through ritual restraint, seasonal timing, and group consensus. The sacred hunt was therefore not only ethical and spiritual, but practical, balancing human need with environmental limits. This early form of ecological awareness would resonate across millennia, influencing the development of cultural norms, taboos, and conservation instincts. Hunting also reinforced the tribe's connection to celestial patterns. Timing hunts according to sunlight, moon phases, or seasonal cues link survival directly to the cycles of nature. Observing the sun and stars ensured coordination with animal behavior, migrations, and safe travel routes. Ritual amplified this awareness, encoding environmental observation into cultural memory. In essence, the sacred hunt merged cosmology, survival, and social cohesion, humans learning to exist within a larger rhythm that transcended immediate needs. Through the combination of skill, ritual, and belief, early humans transformed survival into culture. Hunting was not merely an act of consumption, but a spiritual and social event. Fires, art, chants, and ceremonies elevated everyday actions into meaningful practice, fostering cooperation, knowledge transfer, and long-term planning. Tribes that embraced this integration were better prepared for the unforgiving winters, ensuring that both life and culture endured. Ultimately, the sacred hunt illustrates the profound intersection of human intelligence, spirituality, and adaptation. Ice Age survival demanded not only physical prowess but emotional, cognitive, and social sophistication. By ritualizing the hunt, humans turned necessity into tradition, observation into reverence, and survival into culture. The lessons learned in these ancient hunts echo through history, reminding us that life in the harshest conditions requires not only tools and fire, but meaning, respect, and community. The relentless advance of winter forced cavemen to become wanderers, moving across frozen plains, icy rivers, and snowbound forests in search of survival. Migration was no casual journey. It was a carefully orchestrated odyssey dictated by the seasons, food availability, and the movement of prey. Entire tribes uprooted themselves when resources dwindled, traveling with families, fire embers, and carefully stored provisions. Each migration was a high-stakes endeavor, where planning, observation, and collective effort determined life or death in a world where the cold spared no one. Early humans learned to read the land with extraordinary precision. Tracks in snow revealed the passage of animals. The direction of winds and the shape of clouds hinted at approaching storms. They noticed the subtle shifts in sunlight, the patterns of frost, and the melting of ice, all of which signaled optimal routes and potential dangers. Knowledge of terrain was passed orally, with elders guiding the tribe along familiar pathways while also discovering new ones. Migration became a living map encoded in memory, blending instinct with learned experience to ensure survival in a landscape that was both vast and unforgiving. The logistics of migration were daunting. Families carried children, the elderly, and the infirm, while also transporting tools, fire, furs, and food. Fires were rekindled at night along the route, and temporary shelters were constructed from available resources. Hunters scouted ahead to locate game, while gatherers foraged for edible plants or water sources. Every movement required coordination and communication, reinforcing social bonds and ensuring that no member of the tribe was left vulnerable to the cold or predators. The journey itself was as much a test of collective intelligence as of physical endurance. Animals dictated the rhythm of these migrations. Mammoths, reindeer, bison, and other prey species moved with the seasons, following vegetation and avoiding predators. Humans followed them, not only for sustenance, but also as a way of understanding the environment cycles. Observation of animal behavior became essential knowledge. Which herds could be intercepted, which territories offered safety, and where natural barriers like rivers or cliffs posed threats. Migratory patterns taught humans adaptability, patience, and the ability to anticipate the needs of survival long before they could rely on agriculture or permanent settlements. Environmental challenges were constant. Blizzards, avalanches, and sudden thaws could block paths or destroy supplies. Ice-covered rivers required careful crossing, and thin ice posed deadly risks for both humans and animals. Tribes learned to use terrain strategically, avoiding exposed areas, seeking natural windbreaks, and even manipulating fire and smoke to guide or deter animals. Each migration was a combination of calculated risk, improvisation, and intimate knowledge of nature's moods. Those who failed to adapt often did not survive to tell the story. Social cohesion was critical during these journeys. Tribes had to maintain morale, allocate resources fairly, and ensure that each member understood their role. Elders, hunters, and gatherers each contributed expertise, while children observed and learned. Shared hardship created trust and reinforced interdependence. Cooperation ensured that knowledge of survival, from fire management to animal tracking, was transmitted to the next generation, preserving both life and cultural memory. Migration became not only a physical journey, but also an educational crucible in which skills, rituals, and social bonds were refined. These long journeys also inspired storytelling and myth. Tales of past migrations, encounters with predators, and miraculous survival circulated around fires, reinforcing strategies and teaching lessons. Geographic landmarks, celestial events, and animal behavior were woven into narratives that guided future movements. Storytelling became a mnemonic device, encoding essential survival knowledge while creating a shared cultural identity. Every retelling strengthened group cohesion and prepared young hunters for the realities of the world outside the cave. The psychological dimension of migration was profound. Constant movement, exposure to harsh elements, and the threat of scarcity demanded resilience and mental fortitude. Communities that succeeded learned to transform fear into determination, chaos into order, and uncertainty into strategy. The migration itself became a training ground for patience, observation, and cooperative problem-solving, shaping human cognition and social behavior in ways that would resonate for millennia. Ultimately, Ice Age migrations were far more than mere relocation. They represented the fusion of environmental mastery, strategic planning, and social cohesion. Humans were no longer passive recipients of climate. They became active participants, negotiating their survival through observation, cooperation, and adaptability. These epic journeys laid the foundation for exploration, settlement, and the eventual expansion of humans across continents. By following herds, reading the land, and moving with precision, early humans transformed the frozen world into a navigable landscape. Migration honed survival skills, strengthened tribes, and reinforced the deep connection between people, animals, and the environment. Each winter journey was both a literal and symbolic passage, a testament to resilience, ingenuity, and the enduring human spirit in the face of nature's most severe trials. Fire was the heartbeat of Ice Age survival, a flickering lifeline against the merciless cold. Its presence defined safety, warmth, and sustenance. Without fire, cavemen faced the brutal consequences of freezing nights, food spoilage, and vulnerability to predators. Yet fire was not merely a tool. It became a symbol of human mastery over nature, a force to be protected, tended, and understood. The control of fire separated those who endured from those who perished, making it the most transformative discovery of early humanity. Early humans did not take fire for granted. Lightning strikes or naturally occurring blazes were precious events, their flames carefully captured and transported. Embers were stored in hollowed logs, stones, or containers made from bark or animal stomachs, allowing humans to carry heat across the frozen landscape. This portable warmth was vital during migrations or when constructing temporary shelters. Even a small ember could mean life, providing warmth for a night, a source to cook food, and a signal of safety to the tribe. Learning to start fire independently was a gradual process. Friction-based techniques, such as rubbing sticks together or striking flint against pyrite, demanded patience, skill, and coordination. Generations of trial and error honed these methods, allowing tribes to ignite flames at will. The mastery of fire was not accidental. It required observation of material properties, timing, and persistence. Each successful spark was a triumph of intellect over adversity, a tangible assertion of human ingenuity against the harsh environment. Fire also transformed daily life within shelters. Its light extended waking hours during the long, dark winters, enabling work, learning, and storytelling. Hunters prepared and cooked meat, while artisans processed hides and crafted tools. Children learned observation, problem-solving, and social norms by watching elders work around the fire. It was both a practical and cultural center, fostering social cohesion while meeting essential survival needs. Every flicker illuminated not only the cave walls, but also the intricate web of human cooperation and innovation. The hearth was sacred as much as functional. Careful attention was paid to its construction, with stones arranged to contain flames and reflect heat efficiently. Smoke was channeled to ventilate the shelter, preserving respiratory health, while also creating visual patterns that may have held symbolic or ritual significance. Fire's presence demanded respect. Negligence could lead to injury, lost resources, or catastrophic disaster. The tribe collectively assumed responsibility for its maintenance, reinforcing trust, discipline, and shared vigilance. Beyond warmth, fire was central to food security. Cooking meat increased digestibility, reduced pathogens, and allowed consumption of otherwise inedible parts of animals. Stone boiling techniques, roasting, and smoking were all early culinary innovations that expanded dietary possibilities. Fire also preserved food, enabling storage of surplus meat for harsh winter months. This strategic use of fire linked nutrition directly to survival, demonstrating foresight and planning that went far beyond mere instinct. Fire served as a protective tool against predators. Wolves, bears, and other Ice Age threats were deterred by smoke and flame. Controlled fires were sometimes used to corral animals during hunts, guide them into traps, or drive them toward waiting hunters. In this way, fire was both shield and weapon, a means of controlling the environment rather than being dominated by it. Knowledge of fire dynamics, from smoke patterns to flame behavior, became a vital part of the tribe's collective intelligence. The psychological impact of fire was profound. In the endless darkness and silence of winter, its light provided comfort, reassurance, and a sense of continuity. The flames symbolized life itself, warmth, sustenance, and the possibility of survival. Around the hearth, storytelling and ritual reinforced cultural memory and social bonds. Fire became a center for human imagination, where shadows on cave walls inspired art, myth, and shared identity. It was simultaneously practical, social, and symbolic, demonstrating the inseparability of survival and culture. Guardians of the fire held special status within the tribe. These individuals were responsible for ensuring that embers remained alive during travel, teaching younger members to maintain flames, and coordinating its use for cooking, warmth, and hunting strategies. Their knowledge was indispensable. The loss of fire could be catastrophic. This role required not only skill but also foresight, vigilance, and leadership, embedding early concepts of responsibility, hierarchy, and expertise in a social structure. Fire's discovery and mastery also encouraged experimentation. Humans began to understand properties of different fuels, the importance of insulation around the hearth, and the interaction of fire with wind and materials. Such experimentation fostered innovation, from improved tool-making techniques to better cooking methods. Fire became a medium through which humans tested, observed, and transformed the world around them, creating the first tangible link between cognition and environmental manipulation. In essence, fire was the axis around which Ice Age life revolved. It enabled humans to withstand extreme cold, extend productive hours, prepare, and preserve food and defend against predators. It was a social and psychological anchor, strengthening bonds, transmitting knowledge, and creating culture. Without fire, survival would have been fleeting. With it, humans transformed the environment into a livable and navigable world. Through careful observation, experimentation, and cooperation, early humans became true masters of the element. Fire taught them patience, ingenuity, and respect for the delicate balance of life. It was more than warmth or light. It was the foundation of civilization itself. Every flicker symbolized resilience, every spark represented knowledge, and every maintained flame was a victory against the frozen darkness. The control of fire was not merely survival. It was the dawn of human mastery over nature, intellect, and community. In the Ice Age, shelter was far more than a place to rest. It was a fortress against death itself. The bitter cold, relentless winds, and snow-laden landscape made exposure a constant threat. Caves, overhangs, and rock formations offered refuge. But early humans quickly learned to modify and enhance these spaces to maximize warmth, safety, and comfort. Every wall reinforced, every insulated floor created, was a calculated effort to transform raw nature into a livable environment. Shelters became extensions of human ingenuity, blending observation, material knowledge, and survival instinct. Natural caves were prime real estate. Eastern-facing entrances captured the first rays of the winter sun, providing passive warmth during the brief daylight hours. Floors were layered with grasses, moss, or animal hides to insulate against freezing stone, while walls were cleared of sharp debris and hazards. Fire pits were carefully positioned to radiate heat efficiently without endangering the structure. Over time, humans began reinforcing entrances with stones or branches to block wind and predators. Even temporary shelters built from wood, ice, or animal hides reflected sophisticated planning, demonstrating an early architectural understanding tuned to extreme environmental demands. Shelters were social as well as practical. The hearth became the central hub, with spaces arranged to optimize warmth, activity, and observation. Elders and children were often placed closest to the fire, while hunters and able-bodied adults sat strategically to manage work and rest cycles. This spatial organization reflected careful consideration of safety, energy conservation, and social dynamics. The design of shelters was therefore a reflection of both survival needs and the cognitive sophistication required to maintain group cohesion under extreme stress. Materials were chosen with both function and resourcefulness in mind. Stones, wood, and bones reinforced walls or created rudimentary furniture. Animal hides served as flooring, bedding, or wall insulation, while moss and grasses added cushioning and warmth. Seasonal observation dictated resource selection: thick hides for the deepest winter, lighter furs during transitional months, and waterproofing from fat or sap when rain or snow threatened. Early humans learned to manipulate natural materials to optimize their environment, turning even the harshest terrain into a livable space. Temporary shelters were equally vital for migratory survival. When following herds or relocating due to frozen rivers, humans constructed portable structures from hides, bones, and branches. These shelters were lightweight, easy to assemble, and insulated against wind and snow. The ability to create effective temporary housing ensured survival during long migrations, highlighting the adaptability and practical intelligence of Ice Age humans. Mobility and shelter were intertwined, requiring both planning and dexterity. Shelters also served defensive functions. Predators, from wolves to cave bears, were a constant threat. Entrances were narrowed to prevent intrusion. Elevated sleeping platforms protected vulnerable tribe members, and firelight acted as a deterrent. Observation points near entrances allowed early humans to monitor approaching danger. Every structural feature reflected strategic thinking, an understanding of predator behavior, environmental hazards, and human limitations. Safety was engineered through both design and vigilance. The psychological significance of shelter was immense. In a frozen world, a protected space provided comfort, routine, and stability. The warm, enclosed environment allowed rest, recovery, and planning. Fire, light, and communal proximity created zones of security where survival knowledge could be shared, stories told, and rituals performed. Shelter was not merely physical protection. It was a mental and social anchor, fostering resilience and reinforcing cultural continuity amid the harshest conditions. Shelters evolved over generations. Observations of wind patterns, sun exposure, and animal behavior informed improvements in construction and placement. Techniques for insulation, ventilation, and resource use were refined and passed down orally. The cumulative knowledge embedded in these structures reflected a blend of environmental intelligence, practical skill, and collaborative learning. Over time, shelter became a testament to human adaptability, a tangible record of survival strategies encoded in stone, wood, and hide. The integration of fire, social organization, and structural ingenuity turned caves and constructed shelters into multifunctional hubs. They provided warmth, protection, and a stage for cultural expression. Rituals, storytelling, and social bonding occurred within these spaces, reinforcing communal identity while ensuring survival. Shelters were both tool and symbol, demonstrating the inseparable connection between environment, society, and human creativity. Ultimately, the Ice Age shelter was an early triumph of human problem-solving. By observing the environment, experimenting with materials, and coordinating efforts, early humans transformed raw landscapes into safe, functional, and socially organized spaces. Shelters allowed life to persist despite extreme cold, predators, and scarcity, embodying human resilience, foresight, and ingenuity. They were fortresses, classrooms, and homes, the first enduring testimony of humanity's ability to adapt, innovate, and thrive against overwhelming odds. In the relentless cold of the Ice Age, survival depended not only on strength and courage, but on human ingenuity. Tools became extensions of the body, allowing cavemen to hunt, process food, craft clothing, and build shelters. Stone, bone, and wood were transformed into weapons, cutting implements, and everyday instruments. Each tool reflected careful observation, experimentation, and problem-solving, the earliest forms of technology that enabled humans to dominate a harsh, frozen environment. Survival was no longer left to chance. It was engineered through skill and innovation. Stone tools were foundational. Sharp flakes were struck from larger rocks to create knives, scrapers, and projectile points. These implements allowed efficient butchering, hide processing, and woodworking. Over generations, techniques improved. Flaking became more precise, points were shaped for specific prey, and edges were sharpened and maintained. Mastery of lithic technology increased hunting efficiency and safety, transforming survival into a deliberate practice rather than a gamble. Tools were not merely instruments. They were embodiments of knowledge, skill, and foresight. Bone and antler complemented stone. These materials offered durability and flexibility, ideal for needles, awls, and spear shafts. Bone tools enabled clothing construction, shelter reinforcement, and even art. Human understanding of material properties grew through trial and error. Which bones could pierce hides without breaking, which antlers could withstand stress, and which combinations of materials produced optimal results. These early engineers were not aware of science as we know it, but their empirical experimentation laid the groundwork for technological thinking and adaptive problem-solving. Wood, too, played a critical role. Poles, branches, and logs were fashioned into spears, framework for shelters, sleds, and digging implements. Wood was often combined with stone or sinew to create composite tools, enhancing strength, reach, and versatility. The choice of timber, hard versus soft, flexible versus rigid, reflected deep environmental knowledge. Tools were adapted seasonally. Lighter, more portable implements for migrations and heavier, durable tools for permanent shelters. Through this integration of multiple materials, humans maximized efficiency and resilience. Tools extended to hunting strategy. Spears, atlatls, and clubs allowed humans to confront dangerous animals safely, often from a distance. Stone-tipped projectiles increased lethality, while bone and wood traps manipulated animal movement. Hunters studied prey behavior and environmental conditions to design tools tailored for specific challenges: frozen rivers, deep snow, or thick forest. Each innovation reduced risk and increased the likelihood of securing meat, furs, and bones, essential for survival in extreme conditions. Human ingenuity compensated for physical limitations, demonstrating cognitive advancement under pressure. Tools also enhanced daily life. Scrapers and knives processed hides into clothing. Awls and needles stitched garments and shelter coverings. Hammers and chisels shaped wood for construction. Fire-making devices, such as flint and pyrite, required precision and timing. These tools multiplied human capability, allowing tasks that would have been physically impossible to succeed. Early humans began to view tools as extensions of their intelligence, a way to manipulate nature according to need rather than brute force alone. Knowledge of tool-making was socially transmitted. Young members of the tribe observed elders crafting implements, practicing flaking, shaping, and assembly under supervision. Mistakes became lessons, successes became standardized techniques, and expertise grew cumulatively. This oral and observational education system ensured that survival knowledge was preserved, refined, and passed across generations. In essence, tool-making became both a practical and cultural practice, embedding technology into social identity. Tools were also adapted for migration. Portable kits of knives, awls, and fire-starting implements allowed tribes to carry essential survival technology across icy plains and snowbound valleys. Compact, multifunctional tools reduced weight while maximizing utility. The ability to maintain, repair, and innovate with these implements ensure that humans remained mobile without sacrificing efficiency or safety. Mobility and technology became inseparable in the struggle against the Ice Age. Even in ritual and art, tools left their mark. Pigments for cave paintings were ground with stones, brushes shaped from hair and wood, and patterns carved into bone and wood using knives and scrapers. Tools enabled humans to encode stories, commemorate hunts, and symbolize spiritual beliefs. Survival was thus intertwined with creativity. Technology was not merely functional, but also a vehicle for cultural expression. The cognitive leap of combining practicality with symbolic thought was a hallmark of Ice Age ingenuity. Psychologically, tools fostered confidence and control. In an environment dominated by cold, predators, and scarcity, having implements that could extend human reach and effectiveness reduced fear and uncertainty. A well-crafted spear, a reliable scraper, or a sharp knife represented security and mastery. Humans learned that survival was not a matter of chance, but of preparation, observation, and skill. The development and use of tools enhanced both physical and mental resilience, enabling communities to endure extreme adversity. Ultimately, tools and technology were the linchpin of Ice Age survival. They allowed humans to manipulate their environment, protect themselves, secure food, and preserve resources. They enabled mobility, efficiency, and cultural expression, intertwining practicality with identity. Each flaked stone, sharpened bone, and shaped piece of wood was a testament to human ingenuity, foresight, and adaptability. In the frozen world of the Ice Age, tools were the difference between life and extinction. Through observation, experimentation, and collaboration, early humans transformed raw materials into instruments of survival. These innovations laid the foundation for agriculture, architecture, and civilization itself. Mastering the ice with tools was more than surviving the present. It was creating a future. Technology became both a shield and a bridge, connecting human intelligence to the harsh landscape and ensuring that life endured against the relentless forces of nature. The Ice Age was a crucible that tested the limits of human endurance, ingenuity, and social cohesion. Every day presented challenges: freezing temperatures, scarce food, predators, and the relentless march of winter. Yet, through observation, collaboration, and innovation, early humans not only survived, but laid the foundation for civilization itself. Life in the Ice Age was a constant negotiation with nature, a careful balance between risk and reward, fear and courage, scarcity and ingenuity. This final stage of survival encompassed every element of the human experience, from the physical mastery of tools, fire, and shelter to the psychological resilience that enabled communities to endure. At the core of Ice Age survival was adaptation. Humans continuously refined strategies for hunting, clothing, shelter construction, and fire management. Observation of animal behavior, environmental changes, and celestial patterns informed decision-making, allowing tribes to anticipate challenges before they became emergencies. Flexibility became a key survival trait. Those who could innovate in response to changing conditions thrived, while those who clung rigidly to tradition or instinct often perished. Adaptation was not a single act, but a lifelong practice, requiring both individual initiative and collective intelligence. Social structures were equally vital. The tribe functioned as an extended survival apparatus, where every member had a role. Hunters, gatherers, fire keepers, and elders each contributed specialized knowledge, while children learned through observation, imitation, and gradual participation. Cooperation ensured resource sharing, risk mitigation, and knowledge transmission. Strong social bonds reinforced trust, reduced fear, and promoted psychological well-being. Communities that maintained cohesion and fairness were more likely to endure the harshest winters, demonstrating that human resilience was as much social as it was physical. Ritual, art, and spirituality elevated survival beyond mere subsistence. Storytelling around the hearth preserved collective memory, transmitted practical knowledge, and reinforced cultural identity. Cave paintings of animals, hunting scenes, and symbolic patterns expressed reverence for nature and the sacredness of life. Ritualized hunts, offerings, and seasonal ceremonies strengthened social cohesion and embedded survival strategies within cultural frameworks. These practices nurtured hope, focus, and determination, providing meaning even when the environment seemed overwhelmingly hostile. Psychological resilience was a key factor in survival. Exposure to extreme cold, hunger, and isolation could have eroded morale, yet humans developed strategies to maintain focus and optimism. The warmth of social bonds, the light of the hearth, and the knowledge embedded in tools and clothing created a sense of security and control. Rituals and storytelling transformed fear into respect and preparation, anxiety into strategic thinking. Early humans understood instinctively that survival depended not only on physical resources, but on the ability to endure mentally and emotionally. Innovation was a hallmark of Ice Age life. Humans experimented constantly, improving tools, refining fire-making techniques, developing clothing, and constructing shelters. They observed cause and effect, learned from mistakes, and shared knowledge across generations. These innovations were cumulative, creating increasingly sophisticated survival systems that allowed tribes to thrive in environments previously considered uninhabitable. Innovation also facilitated mobility, enabling humans to follow migratory prey, explore new landscapes, and adapt to shifting climates. The ingenuity of Ice Age humans reflects the very essence of human creativity, solving problems through observation, experimentation, and collaboration. The human-animal relationship was both practical and spiritual. Early humans relied on animals for food, clothing, and tools, yet they also revered their strength, endurance, and spirit. Respect for prey was embedded in rituals, cave art, and hunting practices. This ethical awareness fostered sustainability and a deeper understanding of the natural world. It demonstrated an early ecological consciousness, an understanding that survival required balance, restraint, and observation of patterns that extended beyond immediate needs. Migration and adaptation shaped human cognition and culture. Tracking herds across icy landscapes required memory, spatial awareness, and planning. Seasonal movements, knowledge of water sources, and anticipation of environmental changes honed observational skills and strategic thinking. Migration also reinforced social cohesion. Shared hardships strengthened trust, teaching, and interdependence. In moving through the frozen world, humans transformed the landscape into a stage for the exercise of intelligence, resilience, and cooperation. Legacy was encoded in both material and cultural artifacts. Tools, clothing, and shelters reflected ingenuity. Cave art, ritual, and oral tradition preserved collective memory. Every innovation, observation, and act of collaboration contributed to a cumulative body of knowledge that ensured survival for subsequent generations. The Ice Age forged not only humans' physical capabilities, but also their capacity for foresight, abstract thought, and cultural expression. In essence, the survival of early humans was the survival of ideas, values, and knowledge as much as it was the survival of flesh and bone. Even in adversity, humans celebrated life. Moments of triumph, a successful hunt, a warm fire, or the safe arrival at a new shelter were communal victories. Joy, humor, and creativity persisted despite scarcity and cold, illustrating the indomitable human spirit. These moments fostered cohesion, reinforced shared identity, and provided motivation to endure further hardships. Life was harsh, but was also rich with meaning and purpose, shaped by collective effort, observation, and imagination. The Ice Age, thus, represents a defining period in human history. Survival demanded mastery of fire, clothing, tools, shelter, and social coordination. It required observation of nature, adaptation to change, and the development of ritual and cultural practices. Humans transformed challenges into opportunities, turning scarcity into ingenuity and danger into innovation. The lessons learned during this period, resilience, cooperation, and creativity, became the foundation for the growth of human civilization. In the end, the human spirit endured where many species failed. Through foresight, ingenuity, and collaboration, early humans mastered fire, ice, and stone. They built communities, preserved knowledge, and developed rituals that imbued survival with meaning. The legacy of the Ice Age is not merely the continuation of life, but the emergence of human intelligence, culture, and resilience. Life in extreme cold forged a species capable of adaptation, problem-solving, and creativity, a species that would carry its knowledge and spirit far beyond the frozen landscapes of prehistory. The story of Ice Age humans is a testament to endurance, courage, and the transformative power of the human mind. They mastered elements, tools, and each other, weaving together physical, social, and psychological strategies into a comprehensive system of survival. Their lives illuminate the intersection of necessity and ingenuity, fear and hope, mortality and legacy. Through the lens of survival, the Ice Age reveals not only what it took to live, but what it took to become fully human.